or cut it off, earlier, because there's a lot more slides in the introduction in chapter 1. So we just split it between 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll get to the end of this first chapter today, and then next week we'll pick up in chapter 2. And I'm mentioning chapters because this is all adopted from a book called Music and the Balance, and so that's where it came from. If you're interested in getting that book and reading it, that might be extra credit. Nobody's looking up, so nobody caught that. So it might be extra credit. There's a handful of other books that you could get if you wanted to for the other class, but the lecture book, yes, I ordered them, and hopefully they'll be here before next Thursday. So those should be here. The other one, I don't know why in the world it said July something. So yeah, we'll be back from that by then. Okay, so a syllogism is a major premise, minor premise, and a conclusion. So, like, since this and this, then, that. So, for example, here we have, says we should consider the syllogism, and that is, since music is an emotional language, and since some emotions are wrong for the child of God, therefore, or some emotions can be wrongly applied or handled, some music is wrong for the Christian. And then the question there is, do you agree? Now, remember, and I wrote some notes here on emotions. Not all emotions are good ones. Surely man and his emotions were created in the image of God, but man has fallen, and with him has gone the purity with which he was created. Hate, when directed at sin, is good and acceptable, but when it is directed at a brother in Christ, it is sin. Anger is unacceptable except when one who is angry is not sinning. It is an adulteration of God-given emotion. Anger is obviously an emotion. Sometimes it is sin. Since music is an emotional language, as we already read here, and since some emotions are wrong for the Christian, for the child of God, then some music is wrong for the Christian. Now, some other examples here, some aspect of love is emotional. And I said some aspect because love is not purely emotional. Love has to do also with a commitment and actions that go with it. But then there is an aspect of emotion involved in love. But some aspect of it is emotional. So we can love wrong and hate the good, or we can hate the good, or no, rather we can hate the wrong, and and so on. And so it goes both ways. Sometimes we love the wrong things and hate the right thing, or we hate the things that we should love and love the things that we should hate. I don't know how I worded that there, but I worded it totally wrong. But the concept is that sometimes we love the wrong things. Sometimes we hate the wrong things. And so certainly that emotion can be good or bad. Now, pride is also, it can have an emotional aspect as well, with two faces. And so, I don't know that I fully hold to this concept here. This is from the book, a quote from the book. He says, we can be proud in a healthy or wholesome way. This word being used in our language today in this way, like he says, I prefer to liken it to simply a sense of gladness, belonging, or excitement, like I'm proud to be a Baptist, or I'm proud of our people in their service to the Lord, or I'm proud of my son for something, or you hear people say that. It doesn't mean that they're like welled up with pride and selfishness about it. It's a lot of times it really just means that they're glad, they're excited about it. It's not so much, what's that? Joyous. Yeah, it's like I'm really, and one preacher, he said, I never say I'm proud of my children. He says, I always say I'm pleased with them. I say that's a great way to use, that's a better word, I think. and saying, I'm proud of you. You could say, I'm pleased with you, because that's, of course, what we want before God, right? We want God to be pleased with us. So anyways, but pride is also listed as the first of 6 things which God hates. Amen. Especially the kind of pride that's being going on to, this month. A different light of the word, for example, says that you can be proud of something and not be puffed up in your heart. I think that we should just stay away from the term when it comes to saying that you're excited about something or you're pleased with something. If we stay away from that term, I think scripturally speaking, the only time I ever see pride in the Bible, it's always negative. It's always wrong. It's always sin. So in that sense, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to say that there's an emotional aspect to pride where you're puffed up, and that's the bad part of pride. And then there's the aspect where you're just pleased with something that someone else has done. It's not a matter of selfishness, but it's a matter of being pleased with others' actions. As Proverbs 6:17 says, Proverbs 27 verse 2 says, let another man praise thee and not thine own mouth, a stranger not thine own lips. Again, just the same. You can praise someone else for what they're doing. You can say, Brother Brian, I'm really excited about your growth in the Lord and your dedication to God. I'm excited you guys went out visiting tonight while I was running around trying to figure out what we're going to do about the van. And I might say, I'm really pleased with that. I'm excited about it. Or I could say, man, I'm really proud of myself for, and then everybody knows that I'm just being puffed up and selfish, right? That's the negative, and the positive would be me praising someone else. Boasting is it's very similar. But the concept there, just really that I was just trying to point out, again, having to do with emotion. Emotion has, pure emotion has positive and negative, right and wrong applications. Also, and good and bad. Also, there are some emotions that are typically considered by most people to be good, usually. And then there are other emotions where typically it's bad, but sometimes it's good. Does that make sense? Like we talked about anger. Anger very rarely is good. Very rarely. So most of the time it's bad. Sometimes, very exceptional cases, it's used for good and it's right. But, there you go. Now, love. Well, if it's rightly applied, generally, love is good. But if it's wrongly applied, or the affection of love is the affection of that love is the wrong thing, then it is then wrong, right? So there you go. There were some examples. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but again, we were just drawing the concept here that just like as we talked about music, it is an emotional language, and it is a language, and it is emotional language. It is the language that speaks to your emotions. And just like emotions can be right or wrong, or good or bad, so can music. So we're going to look at this more clearly here. So again, these were the emotions here. Remember, we talked about that, or rather the arts here. There's language you can have good or bad. You can have graphics or drawing and stuff, good or bad. Sound, good or bad. So in other words, the arts are moral. Okay. Not amoral. Remember, we started that concept last week of what moral and amoral is, and people that try to say that that music is amoral, that it shouldn't be judged right or wrong. It just is, and there's not a morality put to it. That what we're trying to establish here is that thought process is a wrong thought process. That music is moral, and it can be either. That's an incorrect statement. It can be either moral or immoral, depending on what it is. So emotions here, hate, anger, pride, fear, as we already discussed here in the last slide, we said that there can be good and bad, right? if it's directed toward the right object, and if it's directed with the right heart. It could be good or bad. So the dynamics of emotions and arts are very similar. So the conclusion that is that emotions are moral. Some people disagree with that too. We live in a day today. In fact, a noon Bible study yesterday had a fella say, look, I'm just going to follow my heart and what I feel is right. Well, what is that saying? That's saying that I believe that whatever my emotions are, they're right, no matter what they are. We live in a day where people say, well, I can't control who I love. I can't control my emotions. It's my heart. It leads me. I have no control over that. Well, that's hogwash. That's baloney. You do control your emotions. And yes, your emotions can be immoral. People may say, oh, well, I love so-and-so. I can't help that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Now you can help how you love someone. We love people in different ways, right? Different levels of love, right? Some guys may say to a friend who's a male, another man, say, I love you, brother, but not mean anything immoral about it. He's simply meaning he loves him. He's his brother in Christ. That you have a love. We have a love of the brethren. That's okay. That's good. That's good brotherly love. That's important. We should have that. But when a man says to another man that he loves him in a deeper way, more of a marital type love, that's inappropriate. I think the word that the Bible uses is unseemly, is the term in Romans chapter 1. Same thing if a woman to a woman. The lesson isn't about that, but still yet love is often confused, and they say, oh, or whatever, you can't control who you love or what you love or whatever. No, you have to control. It's a command in the Bible. It tells you to love not the world. He commands us not to love the world. In other words, we can choose not to love something. And then he commands the husband to love his wife. In other words, the husband may not actually love his wife, and he's commanded to do so, right? And it's more than just some feeling that you have in your chest and your hands get sweaty and stuff. It's an action. It's a commitment. And yes, the feeling goes along with it. And when the feeling goes away, guess what? That doesn't mean the love's gone. We're not doing marriage counseling, but I was just talking to somebody about after our counseling class is done. I was thinking about having another preacher, a friend of mine who does counseling, who teaches counseling and such, come in and teach another few counseling classes on specific topics of counseling, like marriage counseling and addictions counseling and different things like that, to kind of like a 1 credit hour class that would happen. Anyways, so I'm getting off track. Emotions are moral. The arts are moral. There are good and bad of both. So music is a universal language. We're almost getting to where we left off. So again, in Daniel chapter 3, verse 7, you remember reading it last week, says, therefore, at the time when all the people heard the sound of the flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, he could have used, as we see here, a giant gong, just one note, bong, right? Or he could have raised a flag, and then everybody worships, right? He could have done a flaming arrow, or smoke, or pigeons released, or 100 or 1,000 other things he could have done. But instead he used music. Why? Because music is a tool that influences the emotions and behavior. And the Bible, the authority in our lives, substantiates that fact. I don't know if I read this earlier or last week, but I'm going to read through it real quick for you now. Worship is an emotional experience, and music affects emotions. Music was the best tool with which to get the people to worship the idol. It also helped that they were threatened with a trip to the fiery furnace, right? But why would King Nebuchadnezzar go through the trouble of having all the instruments play? And that is because music is the perfect tool, as we just saw here, to influence emotions and behavior. And again, it's important. This important concept here it's really important we get this concept that music does influence our emotions. It influences our behavior. It's not mere entertainment, but it is an effective communicator. Okay, so in a book called The Music Within You, again, remember our references here are not necessarily Christian references. In fact, I think these are all non-Christian references. Says so this book here, you've got these people were certified, the writers here, certified music therapist, instructors at New York University, consultants for several family and child service organizations, and also musicians. So in order to be of one mind and understanding completely on the importance and validity of the syllogism, remember, as we said, since music is I can't quote it, but since music is emotional, then and emotions, or how's that go? And there can be good and bad emotions, then music can be right or wrong also. Okay, that's kind of the concept there, the syllogism. But in order to kind of drive it home and understand it, we're going to look at some of the things that they say here. And so they said, music is communication, and communication is music. Okay. Music is a form of nonverbal communication. Now, by the way, those are the page numbers. If you ever want to verify, you can get the book and open the book to those page numbers, and you can find those quotes there. Oh, sorry. Back. So what are they saying? I know some of this may just seem like duh, right? But this course is designed to take you from some things that you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Okay, what else? To some things like, oh, wait a minute, okay, but it has to build on, build from one thing to the next. Otherwise, the simple stuff that we all kind of know, if we don't get it and apply it to the more complex things, it's hard to understand the more complex things later. Does that make sense? So in other words, what are they saying? They're saying that music communicates, right? So this is in Vienna here, at the Music Museum. This guy right here over top of his piano has said this. Does anybody want to translate for us? It's German. I'll translate for you. My language is understood by the whole world. Words are not needed for there to be meaningful communication with music. This was on his piano, or just over his piano. And in other words, what he's saying here is that my music, the language of my music, is understood by the whole world. We didn't understand what it's written. We didn't understand the actual note that's written. This is the note. We don't understand that. But when he starts to play, we begin to understand what he's saying. Not the note, but we begin to understand that what he's saying is true. That the whole world understands his language, because music is a language that needs no interpreter. It's understood. It's communication is made with music. Dynamics of communication. So this was the results of a study by these communications psychologists, or this communication psychologist, Dr. Albert, Merabian. There we go. And they recorded it in the Reader's Digest there. 1993. So the question then is, how much is communicated, or what percentage is communicated through words, through voice, or through face? What do you guys think? All right, equal all the way through. What do you think? What do you think words is going to be? Because we're going to show them one at a time. What do you think words? So we have 33, 59, least. Equal. Okay, so another 33. Okay. This is what they found. 7% words. You're close on voice, 38%. And somebody said that it was going to be this way without the percentages, but there you go. 55% through the face. So, in other words, 93% of what is communicated in language is communicated through means other than words. 98 or 93%. Your expressions. Your expressions, yes. So I've got some examples here. I often skip the notes, and I shouldn't do that. I just don't notice, because they're on my screen. You've got the big blue there, and then I've got the next slide, and then the notes are like really small, and it's in black, and the notes are white, and they don't jump out and get me. So we're going to demonstrate this. So you may say, I feel great today. Right? You can say that a few different ways. You can say, I feel great today. What did I tell you? Yeah. Now, let's pretend that you didn't see my face, right? And I use the same tone. Just from the tone of my voice, how did I really feel? Right. Now, just from, let's say I change the tone of my voice, but I don't change my face. That's hard to do, by the way. I feel great today. I feel great today. Looks like you're trying to lie to me, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, what if I say, I feel so awful today? Yeah, right. You ever do that to your dog before? Like, you're such a bad dog. I can't believe you. Yes. And the dog's wagging its tail, and you're like, you're so stupid. Right? Because what are you communicating? You're communicating the opposite of what you're saying. Right? The opposite of the words that are coming out. We can say lots of things. We can by how we say something, we can turn a statement into a question. I can say, I feel great today. What? I said the same words, but to you, you think I was just asking you how I feel. How do I feel today, right? Again, just by the way you say something. Notice, if you ever just think about, and I know some of you, Brother Rob had mentioned at the very beginning that, it'll be neat to find out how much communication is done through music, and how much it speaks and expresses and affects us, right? But in order to understand that, we also have to consider how much of our communication happens without words, right? So let's see here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. So organized sound can be more, it can be more crafty, less overt, or more simple, or more subtle, rather, than words, and therefore much more powerful. You know, for example, I will go back to I feel great today, right? I feel great today. Not the face, just the sound. Now what? Now how do I sound? Mad. That's right. I sound mad. It's like, how you doing? Great. Or how you doing? Great. That's kind of like a question, right? Great. You know, that's something I was picking on the Civil Air Patrol for on Tuesday. I asked the prior commander who knows a lot. I said, hey, when they're in formation and they say, at ease, I said, is that the way the Air Force does it? I said, because like I used to think the Air Force was like a bunch of pansies because I was in the Army, you know. But if that's actually how they do their formations, I don't just think they are anymore. I know they are. um, I'm kidding. No, I said, is that really how they do it? He said, no, that's those kids. They have no command voice. You know, you just how do you tell somebody to do something? So you know, you ask, you say, you know, you say to the kids, clean that trash up. What are they going to do? Clean that trash up. Clean that trash up. Clean that trash up.
Yeah, there you go. And they pick the end up.
Yeah.
That was the best one.
Right.
Now.
You don't even have to say now. You see, you communicate with your voice and with your face. What you know, you the words only specify the what for instance, but your expression and your tone and your pitch, and you know the volume, duration, timbre, pitch, all of that expresses so much that the words are not expressing. For example, I can give my children a look without speaking a word, and they know what I'm saying. Those of you men that are married, you don't even have to hear. I don't even have to tell you, right? You know. I'm not saying, you know, I'm just saying that women are really good at expressing themselves without even speaking. Yes. And you know what? Men aren't so good at that. You know, sometimes we try to express ourselves and we're just not very good, but I'm trying, I'm working on it. But, yep. So, that's why often if you guys pay attention to me, you'll notice I look at my wife's face a lot while I preach, because I like to know what she thinks, especially if I touch the area of marriage or preaching on something the women need or any of those things. I watch her face. Sometimes she's got a good poker face when it comes to church. She will just she'll just be like, I'm like, come on, tell me something here. Tell me something, you know, because sometimes I'll be giving an illustration and I want to know if I'm going too far or not, you know, because we men, we go too far all the time. And we don't, you know, we don't pay attention to where we're headed or how we got there. And then we're there and we're like, how did I get here? This is a pretty deep hole. How do I get out of here? Somebody give me a shovel, right? um, and so what do I do when I'm giving an illustration? Often I'll look at my wife just to see if my illustration has gone too far. As soon as it does, I know. And it's not that she gives me a bad look. It's just that she's able to communicate with me without even speaking to me, without even saying something, right? So our faces communicate. We can go on that. I could do a whole series of lessons on that, but we're not going to right now. Music is not just a special part of life. It represents life. So says the music within you. From it, we receive inspiration, excitement, and emotional enrichment. With it, we create, communicate, and express who we are. I don't know why it makes the page number another click, but there you go. So that's an interesting statement, isn't it? And that's from the world. So, who are we? If music expresses who we are. If we express our music, if we express through our music who we are, then a fitting question obviously would be, who are we? So before answering through finding out what music we have, we are the people who claim to have the truth, right? If we express through our music who we are, then our music becomes it becomes a very important truth statement. Yet that statement is often nonverbal, isn't it? So we have some notes here. So how does such communication take place? Okay. But then now music without words on the nonverbal, right? There's think of how can somebody think of some example of music without words? Classical music, okay. Do we ever have music without words in church? During the altar call. Offerings, yes. Yeah. Sometimes people do instrumentals. Now, most of the time, we have a song that goes with the music and we hear this, and I've had, what's interesting, what's really neat is when you sit in a church of folk, a large group of people, and I don't mean huge, just, significant number of people, maybe 50, 100, somewhere in there. And somebody gets up and they play a song on the piano or on a violin or, with some wind instrument or something, they play a song. And I have been sitting and listening to someone playing a song like that in like a youth rally, for example, many times, no words, but the audience is amening it at specific spots in the song because they know what it's communicating. Often because they know the words that go with the song. We'll give them that. That's right. If you play it, all the veterans stand up. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a reason for that as well. There's a feel. We're going to get to that hopefully today. When words are not known or understood, the intent of the message comes to the listener through the character of the sound, that is the music itself, and the spirit of the delivery as well, right? Man, I have seen people sing songs and they look like they are dead. And I'm careful with that because you've got the other extreme where they're just over the top, performing over the top. Sure. And so I'm careful with that, but at the same time, I want to try not to be dead either. I want to be alive. I want to express what the song's expressing, not only with my voice, but with my face. That doesn't mean that I need to act it all out, although there's some that it's like you want to, right? That like wave the answer back to him, right? And I can't because I'm always playing the guitar. So anyways, we'll keep on going here. And I'm going to try to move a little more quickly until we get, because we got some samples and stuff we want to deal with here. So again, quoting another book, there's the title. You guys can read. Double Language of Music, the Sound and the Word. You have double language, right? Sound and the word. The sound language has gained the upper hand here on New Worship. There's your info on that. Charismatic believers have a right to develop their own worship to match their own theology and exegesis. And they have done this very well. Okay. exegesis is the explaining of a passage, or the interpretation of a passage. Okay, so they've done this very well. So this is continued from page 10 from that book. Non-charismatics should not thoughtlessly copy or imitate their worship formulae, unless they expect to enter the same Holy of Holies the same way. Instead, they should develop their worship rationale or based on their scriptural understanding, and then sing up to their own theology. This is important, okay? And I know some may say, wait a minute, hold on. What in the world? Why? If you just stop and think about what that means, charismatics have a style of music that they use for a specific reason. It fits their theology, and it even fits the emotional ramp up that they're trying to cause in their services. It fits it. And then so many people like the feeling that comes from it that they try to reproduce it in non-charismatic settings. Okay. Y'all know what charismatic, I see some, okay. So charismatic, well, specifically charismatic has to do, the charismatics, those that would be in a charismatic type of group setting would be Pentecostals, holiness, some Nazarenes, apostolic. They're Pentecostal as well, but that's the ones who are they are drumming up in their music. They use their music to do it. It hypes the flesh so much that you have to do something. Now there are some songs that really ought to get you moving, ought to get you excited, but they shouldn't have you babbling nonsense. Anyway, so music expresses and reflects theology, and so again, there's stuff that goes along with that. Somebody made a point. There's stuff that goes along with it. That's awesome. If we can play that every time I make a point. No, I'm just kidding. Wasn't yours? Is yours? Okay. I'm not picking at you, brother. No, it's just like every time pastor made a point, do, right? What's that? Breaking news. Okay. That's ESPN, right? Oh, I thought there was just sports in it. Anyways, music, the brain, and ecstasy. I think we quoted them earlier. We'll have a quote here from page 273. And so every statement has at least two meanings: a verbal meaning that in some sense describes the speaker's experience, and an intonational meaning that reflects the speaker's feelings about that experience. You'll notice that when I preach, I try to utilize intonational. There you go. Or intonational, however you say that word. I try to match what I'm trying to say, right? As my I think this is funny that I'm about to say this. I can't believe I'm about to say this. My massage therapist, I was talking to him yesterday. The guy at the VA that like twists my neck and stuff. Anyways, he said he called it the Superman pose. So when you're standing, you're preaching, you try to stand tall and stand big, and you're speaking out, and you're trying to be, you're trying to be straightforward, and you're trying to, so on and whatever. And I told him, and he's 6'5", so he knows about being tall, right? I said, but when I come down off the platform and I'm talking to people one-on-one, I have a tendency, I'm just going to sit there and show, but the thing here. So I have a tendency to often do something like this. I'll come down, say I'm off the platform, I'll come down and I'll sit to talk to them, or I'll lean down, or I'll crouch over. You guys ever notice me doing that? Because I'm trying to get face to face. I don't want to be like over them and overbearing, right? Because your position communicates something as well. And then how you say things. When I talk to people, I may not be quite as passionate, so to speak, when I'm talking just straightforward, face to face. But again, how you say it also determines what you're saying, not just the words you say. We already did that exercise, right? With I feel great, right? Or I feel great. So another syllogism. Major premise is what? Music is a form of communication. We also dealt with emotion, but now we're dealing with communication. Minor premise. It is possible to have good and evil communication. Anybody disagree with that point? Okay. Conclusion, therefore, it is possible to have good and evil forms of music. Most people agree with this. There are a rare few that do not. They'll say, it just depends. We'll get some examples here in a little while, and you'll be like, some of you will be like, that is absolutely wrong, period, just wrong. And others might say, well, I don't know. But as we get done with this class, hopefully everybody can kind of agree on why something is wrong, if it's wrong. Music is a language. Music is a universal language. Music is a spiritual language. There are over 500 direct references to music in the Bible. We can certainly conclude that music is a very weighty issue to God. So he highly recommends here for further study on music in the Bible, this book here. It's the music of the Bible in Christian Perspective, written by Garen Wolfe, the first, I guess. It was a 20-year project. There are 419 pages, and it's a great reference there. Were you writing that down? Do you want me to go back to it? Okay. Yeah, and if you see a screen that you're like, man, I need to get that, take a picture of it if you want. That's fine. Just click. It's good. And you'll have it. Or if you can write fast, write it down. So The Secret Power of Music here by David Tame. He said, like human nature itself, music cannot possibly be neutral in its spiritual direction. Materialistic humanism, devoid of genuine, regenerative spiritual value. This is referring to specific, type of music. So there's surely no doubt that music actually conveys very real and sometimes very specific emotional states from the musician to the listener. The term spiritual in this comment here comes from the author or an author with a New Age agenda and perspective. Okay, this isn't a Baptist guy, not a historic, unaffiliated, independent King James Baptist guy. This is a guy with a New Age agenda and perspective. His observation is nevertheless very significant in reference to music, those statements being made. So this guy here, I almost said Zuckerberg, Zuckerman, close relative, I guess. He said in a book, Where Have Our Values Gone, or in a editorial rather, Where Have Our Values Gone, he says, personal impulses, especially sexual, are constantly stimulated by popular music and television and other mass media not far behind. TV and music often seem to honor everything that the true American ethic abhors, violence, infidelity, drugs, drinking, and to despise everything that embraces religion, marriage, respect for authority. So this weighty comment here he's the chief editor of a major magazine, U.S. News and World Report. Some may say that he is perhaps speaking only of the words in popular music. Perhaps, however, the next quotations, as we're going to look at here, come from an even better qualified source who will leave no doubt. So here in a book called Hole in Our Soul, and so on, she says, Martha Bales says, the West is the only civilization to have created a form of art whose sole purpose is to attack morality. Mm-hmm. This author believes that music is moral. Why? Because a neutral medium cannot attack morality, right? All right. we got to move here quickly. So she also said, I argue that something has gone seriously wrong, both with the sound of popular music and with the sensibility it expresses. Few critics have addressed the subject of sound, which is, after all, what the music is made of. Are we beating a dead horse yet? Almost. This neglect of music is regrettable because just as assaultive as the lyrics and images of contemporary popular music, so are many of the sounds. Popular music seems terminally hostile to any sound traditionally associated with music. So, we're going to look at this, whoops, hold on. Okay, the notes for this slide were on the last slide, so y'all tell me, is the thing on? I may have to have you adjust the sound volume. Tell me what kind of, whoops, sorry, let's go back. What kind of music is this? You got it. You know something's wrong when the kids come out of the nursery asking, what is that? And it won't stop. It is, here, let me just go back and there we go. I have to leave the slide to make it stop. Okay, it's Christian music. No, here's when they started there. Nice little girl there. Actually, all of them, a bunch of little girls. Anyways, here they are now. There they are now. What's the stage set for here? A rock band, yeah. So there's your first sound sample. Really bad. It is a really good bad example. There you go. This is so the music and the this is deliberately shocking for a reason. Okay. And by the way, I would not play sounds like that in church if it wasn't for trying to teach you. Okay. So it's designed to gain attention and interest. It's designed to get your attention and get you to pay attention to it. Also, it's to help you to see the depths to which the CCM has fallen. And the term CCM will be further explained as we continue through this, but I'll simply explain that CCM stands for Contemporary Christian Music. Now, understand that contemporary Christian music does not mean music that is Christian and also contemporary. It's a specific style of music, okay? And that specific style of music is, and that style has many genres that are associated with it. You have quote unquote, and we're going to get into this more later, but you have Christian rock, Christian rap, Christian pop, Christian country, Christian fill in the blank, blues. If there's a worldly genre for it, there is a quote unquote Christian genre for it today. And there's your first example there. So even though this group was, they were on their farewell tour, they continue to be very popular by still enjoying high ratings on the charts as of the time of the writing. Yeah, Petra, which means rock. Means rock, yeah. So how would she describe and evaluate that sound? Here's what she would say. Such heavy metal lacks, not that she actually specifically spoke about that particular song, but this is what she says about the sound associated with it. Since heavy metal lacks aesthetic sophistication in the realms of music, language, visual art, and theater, its sole claim to artistic seriousness lies in its perversity. Ouch. Take that, Petra. What? It takes its only claim to artistic seriousness lies in its perversity, in the fact that it is perverse in and of itself. So she continues, it's ironic that for all their mutual antipathy, heavy metal and disco came to resemble each other in this respect: pounding, monotonous rhythm that carries sexual feeling to dehumanized extremes. In Job chapter 14, verse number 4, y'all think that's a music verse? No, but does it have a music application? It sure does. And I didn't type it out here for some reason. Job chapter 14. I'll jump over there real quick. Verse number 4. I'm going to have that happen once in a while, that where I missed something here. Job chapter 14. Verse number 4. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Ooh. Not one. Music verse? No. But does it have a music application? Absolutely. So this is from a book called Why Johnny Can't Tell Right from Wrong, on a section entitled, or the chapter titled Music and Morality. The author says, rock confirms their, that's young people's, right to have and express strong sensual emotions. The message is your feelings are sacred and nothing is set above them. This in its essence is all about what rock is about. That's all what rock is about. Furthermore, he continues, we're running out of time, and I've got a lot to go here. Why Johnny Can't Tell Right from Wrong? He says, rock can't be made respectable. The music will simply subvert the words. No matter how many reforms are attempted, rock and rap will always gravitate in the direction of violence and uncommitted sex. The beat says, do what you want to do. By the way, what do people tell you when you say, man, that music you're listening to has some really bad words in it? I'm not listening to the words. I'm listening to the beat. And what do Christians tell you when you say that music you're listening to has some really bad noise in it? They say, I'm not listening to the music. I'm listening to the words. No, it's because it's not the lyrics nor the tune. It's the beat. Hold on a second here. There's some other quotes. I'll just skip them for now. Music is a language. Music is a universal language. Music is a spiritual language here. Music is also considered to be, by many people, simply a matter of taste and preference. So this is your brain on music. He says, music and musical preferences become a mark of personal and group identity and of distinction. Again, why is it so important that people ask you, what kind of music are you listening to? because they want to associate you with a certain culture, with something specific in their minds, right? Because the music you listen to associates you with something. A medium, yes, a medium so powerful as music, packed with such great emotional, spiritual, moral, and physical influence over God's highest creation, man, needs to pass under the magnifying glass of Scripture, rather than being dismissed through the neutral pretense of taste and preference. Music is an important issue. It's not something to be just pushed aside. In the book Satan's Music Exposed, he's one of these. He says, let's see here. I've got. Hold on. Okay, here's the quote over here. Many years ago, as a young non-Christian dance band musician, I enjoyed playing with in ballrooms and nightclubs. If anyone had suggested to me that this same music would someday be heard in evangelical churches as the now sound, I would have regarded their suggestion as the best joke of the day. Today, we are hearing this sound, but it is no joke. It is a pitiful paradox. Songs like Amazing Grace, Oh Happy Day, and the Lord's Prayer have been played on rock stations. Rock, jazz, and blues are being heard in the church. And though many Christians are questioning the trend, few are speaking out against it. Many Christian young people think that it is just about the best thing that has ever come along. Parents are confused, and many Christian leaders and pastors admit they do not know enough about music to make a decision when questions do arise. To add to the confusion, many well-known Christian musicians who were formerly traditionalists are now pushing the contemporary sounds. That was all from that book, The Hurried Child. And we're going to try to get done quick here. We're going to end up starting the next class late. Estimated at least 6 hours daily. This is the amount of time young people spend listening to the top 40 music stations or to stereo sets. It's been estimated to be 6 hours daily, and that's your average person now. Since the digital age and being able to just stick headphones in your ears and play it from your phone, it's really, I'm sure, much more than that now. Average, we're saying, not necessarily everybody, but average. Directed not so much to the conscious as to the unconscious, thus too easily dismissed, right? Most of the time people are just playing it as background noise. I have a hard time playing music as background noise. I get drawn into it. Music wields power. Ray Charles said, "The way I see it, we're actors, but musical ones." He says, "We're doing it with notes and lyrics, with notes telling a story. I can take an audience and get them into a frenzy so that they'll almost riot. And yet I can sit there so that you can almost hear a pin drop." Musicians know it. You can absolutely control people with music. We have Plato quoted here saying, music has thus the power to form character. Some Christians will recoil and say, only God can form character. But God said, be not deceived, evil communications corrupt good manners. Manners are the fleshing out of character, right? It's how you live. Is that a music verse? Nope. Music application? Certainly. So an important resolution here, that which is neutral obviously cannot impact character. However, when we ascribe or attribute morality to an entity, it must, by its very nature, have the capacity to affect and influence character. It is inconsistent and illogical to conclude that music is moral and its influence upon character is neutral. In the book, Who Needs Classical Music? Julian Johnson says, investing in the products of the music industry is one way we define our personal identities. There you go. There's the further statement on, music is who you are. A challenge to the music through which one identifies oneself is experienced the same or with the same anxiety as a personal attack. It is. By the way, when we start talking about stuff like this, when a preacher gets up, he starts preaching against, Christian rock music or, whatever. When a preacher gets up, he starts preaching against your music, whatever it is. You experience that as a personal attack at you often, and you respond that way. There's another part that we're going to get to later where it talks about, music being a giant, and it absolutely is a giant in people's lives, and it has such a hold that they will not let go. Here in the closing of The American Mind, Alan Bloom says, rock music has one appeal only, a barbaric appeal to sexual desire, not love, not eros, but sexual desire, undeveloped and untutored. Rock gives children on a silver platter with all the public authority of the entertainment industry, everything their parents always used to tell them that they had to wait for until they grew up and would understand later. What rock music gives to the children on a silver platter. You recognize this guy? Okay, the older people do, the younger don't, right? Yeah, Mick Jagger, what's that? Looks like a screaming lady, that's right. He sounds like one too, and here's what he said. He said, we are moving after the minds, and so are most of the new groups. Think about that. They're going after your mind. How about this guy? Yep, you got it, David Crosby. He was a little more articulate, he said, and not as popular though. The other guy, Rolling Stone magazine, all that stuff. I mean, he's pretty popular. Anyways, he says, I figured the only thing to do was to swipe their kids. I still think it's the only thing to do. By saying that, I'm not talking about kidnapping. I'm just talking about changing the value system, which removes them from their parents' world very effectively. Through music. He was a musician. This is our last slide for chapter 1. We're going to have some more things in chapter 2 as well, but I hope we get through chapter 2 in a week. It might take 2 weeks. This thing, last time I taught this, it took 20 hours. So it may go from a 1 credit hour to a 2 credit hour class. I just didn't want to make that happen if not necessary. So simple yet profound observation from talking tombstones, rather, not taking tombstones, and other tales of the media age. They said media preserves and transforms values. Each medium of communication leaves its mark by altering our institutions and personal attitudes and values. Preaching the Word of God also teaches and reinforces values. An interesting condition exists in the church today, or in churches today. In ages past, churches, the church, the local church, was a guardian of purity. It objected to the introduction of the organ, new harmonies and rhythmic patterns as they were developed and added to sacred music. Today, quote, the church has embraced the new sounds and forcefully defends their inclusion, while the world says that's not appropriate. It's sensual and unhealthy for a society. Not all of us are going to come through this series. I wrote this down. I'm going to read it to you. Not all of us are going to come through this series in the same arena, on the same side, in the same section, in the same row, and in the same seat. But our prayer is that we'll arrive in the same arena, sit down on the same side, be in the same section, and perhaps most of us will be in the same row, right? We may not be like exactly, you know, sitting in the same seat as we come into this concept. But hopefully we'll be in the same row anyways. Certainly in the same building, right? Amen. Any thoughts, questions, real quick? I'm gonna give you 2-3 minutes, and we'll go over 10 minutes on the next class, I guess.
You talked earlier, you emphasized that you talk about the tune, the melody, but specifically the beat. A lot of times you don't hear drums, percussion, a lot of Baptist churches.
You're doing some. By the way, percussion is not the problem. It's how it's played. It's how it's played. Drums are not necessarily the enemy. It's what's being communicated. Again, it's the tool. Music is a tool, and it can be a very good tool that can communicate very good things, or it can be a very bad tool that can communicate very bad things. Just the same with just about every single instrument, including the drum. Drums do have their place. They can be used. We usually don't use them in church because we usually don't need them. We're not usually marching. We're not usually, trying to say we're not at war, right? But the piano is a percussion instrument. There's hammers in here and they pound on strings. So when we use that, the piano's pounding on stuff. It's a percussion instrument, and your fingers are pounding on the keys, right? Maybe gently or roughly, depending on what you're trying to communicate, right? The guitar is not sitting there because it's at home. It's a string instrument, but what do? You pluck the strings, and so there's a percussive type of, and it has an acoustic barrel in it that reverberates the sound. But there's a percussive type of style there, and I don't pluck the strings. I hit them with a pick. So it's certainly percussion. We use percussion in our church services, but we use it, hopefully, I don't really know how to do it very well, but hopefully I'm using it in such a way that it's communicating the right message, not the wrong. It's working with the sound. The sound is working together with the words instead of working against the words. Does that make sense? So I'm agreeing with you about you don't usually see drums in a Baptist church. It's most of the time it's because the music that's being played, you don't have the other instruments to back to justify the use of drums. So if we had an orchestra, an orchestral band, we may have drums with it, because you're going to have multiple string instruments. You're going to have maybe even some wind instruments, and so you may have various other instruments, percussive instruments like drums, or like a xylophone, or like even a little, what do they call that little triangle thing, right? They call it a triangle, don't they? Right? Or you might have a tambourine. The problem is any of those things should add to, not take over the music. Does that make sense? And we'll get to that as we go through here, because we're dealing with the balance, and we're going to look at that next week. We're going to look at new life, new music, and we'll take it from there. Nothing else for now? Email me if you have any other questions, or text me, or whatever. Let's pray.